Hello everyone. Today we would like to show you why compulsory licenses in Germany are still a tool with unconsidered chances, respectively risks, depending on the perspective, not only for the pharma industries. My name is Axel Berger and I'm standing here with my colleague Johannes Heselberger.
And we recently handled one of the few cases in compulsory licensing. Yeah, one of three in decades.
Right.
Why is a compulsory license such an important tool in our system specifically? That is because we have this mandatory injunction. No discretion to grant an injunction. It has to be granted if it's requested. A compulsory license can offer a way out for a defendant, a legal way out. Compulsory license has two prerequisites. There must be a public interest asking, so to speak, for this compulsory license. And the defendant, the license-seeking party, must have seriously and unsuccessfully tried over some period of time, the law says, to obtain a license by contract. Now, since there is very little case law, there is much leeway for argumentation.
Leeway in particular because all the cases that have been dealt with by the courts are to date pharma cases. So the only public interest that has been discussed so far is patient well-being. But one could of course well imagine that public interest can also be found in other industries. Take for example the car industry. It could well be argued that there's a public interest of a company being able to manufacture or deliver, for example, police cars or ambulances.
Absolutely. Procedurally, there are two ways to obtain a compulsory license. There are PI proceedings, preliminary injunction proceedings, which would provide, if they are successful, the right to use the patent, so the license itself. And then there would be main proceedings, in which also the license question could be decided and would be decided, but also the compensation, the license fee, would be decided upon. If a preliminary injunction request is brought, also a main proceeding has to be started. For both types of proceedings, the first instance is the Federal Patent Court, the Bundespatentgericht in Munich. For the appeal instance, that is the Federal Court of Justice, the Bundesgerichtshof in Karlsruhe.
Right, and in particular the PI proceedings are a really speedy procedure given the complexity of such cases. So in the last two cases, it only took a couple of weeks from bringing the request to have a first instance decision. For the appeal proceeding, that was also dealt with within a year from the request.
Timing of the main proceedings in first instance is about 1 to 1.5 years. That's the experience from the two newer cases. With regard to the appeal procedure, we do not have that experience, but according to regular schedule of the Federal Court of Justice, we will expect that to take about 2 years.
Right. And with the first instance decision already being pronounced after a couple of weeks after having brought the request, this shows how good such case needs to be prepared. This is for both prerequisites, the one demonstrating the public interest, but of course also to show that one was unsuccessful in obtaining a contractual license despite serious efforts.
Indeed, that is a point that has to be specifically and early on considered. The law requires serious and unsuccessful attempts to negotiate a contractual license over, the law says, an extended period of time. This means a license-seeking party has to make its case towards the patentee. It has to say why it needs a license, what justifies that license, and what it is willing to pay as a fair compensation. Now, explaining why that is needed oftentimes requires detailed explanations, like in the pharma field, to provide documents which show indeed that there is a need, and that is also imaginable in other fields. So timely preparation, offer to exchange information, to exchange documents, if needed, if regular parties in normal licensing negotiations would do that, that is a requirement. All in all, we see many similarities to the licensing negotiations surrounding the FRAND conditions.
Okay. So if a request for a preliminary injunction for a compulsory license is considered in the context of infringement proceedings, it needs to be considered early on, probably after realizing that there's little room to argue non-infringement. If then the alleged infringer realizes that he cannot obtain a contractual license, he may still be in the position to continue his otherwise patent infringing acts via a compulsory license. The risk is, of course, that the Federal Patent Court then later finds for a compensation that is higher than what he could have otherwise negotiated for a contractual license. Vice versa, if the court finds for a lower license fee, for example, that could also be a chance, of course.
From a patentee view, it might be better to negotiate a contractual license with a limited scope, with a good price, than taking the risk of having a court decide on the scope and on the price of the license.
Right. On the other hand, the compulsory license may also be granted with or under certain conditions. So it's not that if you are granted a compulsory license, you may use the patent in whatever way you want. Likewise, the compulsory license is not there for all times.
Exactly. If the public interest falls away, for whatever reason, the compulsory license could be brought to an end. And also, if the patent is invalidated, the compulsory license would come to an end.
Right. So, in summary, the compulsory license in Germany is probably still an underestimated tool. We would expect to see more requests for compulsory licenses in Germany in the future, likely also in other industries, not only pharma. Still, the prerequisites are strict and the requests need to be carefully considered and prepared.
And rebutted too. And it's not only about pharma cases. Thank you very much.